I was about to walk out the door, but not before I took down the whole house with me. The hotel banquet room smelled of expensive wine and polished wood, the kind of place they rented once a year to celebrate excellence. I had my laptop bag slung over my shoulder, a folder under my arm stuffed with 6 months of work, logistics data, route maps, projections, all the hard numbers that kept Freight Corps moving. I walked toward the door, already spotting my department spread out at a long table near the front. There was laughter, applause, the sound of champagne glasses clinking. Then Renata stepped in front of me. "Kyle, we're at capacity. You can wait outside." Her voice was pleasant, but her eyes flicked past me like I was invisible. I blinked, confused. "What? My team is in there." She didn't move. "Sorry. Only reserved guests are allowed in. Dominic's orders." Behind her, I saw Cody, the Ivy League intern who had been at Freight Corps all of 3 weeks, laughing with Dominic like they were old friends. Cody had my framework on the table in front of him. My framework. The one I had built night after night, weekends spent staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned. I spotted a plaque sitting on the podium. Innovation in Logistics, Cody Hallberg. My chest tightened. I wasn't surprised, not really. Dominic had been carving pieces of my work off for years, dressing them up like his own. But this, giving the credit to a kid who still needed help finding the coffee machine, was something else entirely. I gripped my folder harder. "You're telling me I can't sit with my own team?" Renata offered me a smile so thin it felt like a blade. "Company policy, Kyle. I'm sure Dominic will explain later." I glanced around the room. There was a seat open, but not for me. Not for the guy who built the damn system they were celebrating. I looked at Cody again, his smirk aimed right at me, like he knew exactly what he was taking. My hand shook, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I stepped back into the hallway. I put the folder down on a side table, opened my laptop, and connected to the hotel Wi-Fi. My cursor hovered over the send button. My heart was pounding, but my head was clear. One click, and every manager, director, and board member in the company would have the files. The timestamps, the original code, the proof that every innovation they'd just toasted belonged to me. I hit send. Within seconds, I heard it. A wave of phones buzzing inside the banquet room, the laughter stalling like someone had pulled the plug. If I'd left then, maybe none of this would have happened. But I stayed. And that was my first mistake. I joined Freight Corps fresh out of grad school, clutching dual MBAs like they were my golden ticket, one in operations, the other in systems engineering. I was 28, hungry, and stupid enough to think that hard work would always be rewarded. On my first day, I walked through those glass doors with the kind of optimism you only have before life grinds it out of you. The first year, I did everything they said couldn't be done. I cut inventory losses by a third, 33% to be exact. I tore apart the route optimizer and built it back up from scratch, shaving hours off every delivery schedule. And then I caught a software bug that could have cost us our biggest account, a mistake so deep in the system that IT swore it was unsolvable. I fixed it. When I brought it to Dominic, our department head, he barely looked up from his phone. "Good work, Kyle," he said, like he was tossing a bone to a dog. "Keep it up." That was it. No raise, no promotion, no recognition, just a pat on the head and another pile of urgent reports dropped on my desk. The thing about people like Dominic, they don't hate hard work. They just want credit for it. 6 months later, I built a predictive model for port delays, a system that used live data from shipping lanes and weather patterns to forecast bottlenecks before they happened. It wasn't perfect, but it was damn close. The day I presented it to the team, Dominic nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting concept," he said. "I'll think on it." 2 weeks later, he presented my model at an executive strategy session. His name was all over the slides. He didn't even bother changing the color scheme. When I cornered him about it, he smirked like it was a friendly misunderstanding. "Look, Kyle, you're good with numbers. I had the concept. You just made it real." "No, I built it," I said. My voice shook, not because I was scared, but because I was trying not to scream. Dominic shrugged. "Company time, company tools. You want to keep climbing? Don't make waves." That night, I didn't sleep. I typed up a detailed report and marched into HR the next morning, ready to fight. Eleliana, the HR manager, didn't even flinch. Kyle, if this model was developed on company hours using a company laptop, it's company property. Intellectual ownership doesn't really apply here. I stared at her. So Dominic can just... That's how it works, she cut me off, her tone soft but final. If you want credit, make sure your contributions are documented by your supervisor. My supervisor, Dominic, the guy who'd just stolen my work. I walked out of that office with my hands balled into fists. I could have quit then, I should have, but instead, I told myself it was just one bad hit, that the next project would be different. I was wrong. What I didn't know was that this was only the first slap, and there were plenty more coming. I went home that night and didn't sleep. Not out of sadness, out of planning. 6 months before the banquet, I built something that could have redefined the company, a logistics redesign so sharp and efficient it felt like cracking a secret code. I poured everything into it, nights spent eating cold takeout, weekends lost to whiteboards and late-night simulations. It wasn't just a project. It was my proof that I was more than the background guy crunching numbers. When the quarterly strategy meeting rolled around, I was ready. I printed the folder myself, laid out the framework in clean diagrams and bulletproof math. I was halfway through setting up when Dominic strolled in, coffee in hand, and clapped me on the shoulder like we were buddies. "Let me see what you've got," he said, flipping through the pages. He gave it maybe 20 seconds before nodding, like he'd just skimmed a menu. "We're pressed for time," he announced as the meeting started. "I'll hit the highlights." I sat there, watching in disbelief as he butchered months of work in less than 2 minutes. He skipped the predictive load balancing feature, skipped the dynamic rerouting model, all of it. He just mumbled something about ongoing analysis and shoved the folder aside like it was an afterthought. "We'll need further review," he said, his tone dismissive but calculated. That was his move. Strip you down in public, then quietly take your work when no one was looking. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the back of the conference room when Cody, the intern who still asked me how to convert files to PDF, stood up to present his innovative framework. I froze. It was my system, not just the concept, every diagram, every model, every line of logic, all of it, watered down, renamed, and wrapped in flashy buzzwords that made it sound like something out of a TED Talk. Dominic sat front and center, nodding like a proud father. "Great initiative," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "This is exactly the kind of thinking we need around here." People clapped. I felt like I was watching my own funeral. I cornered Dominic afterward. "What the hell was that?" He didn't even blink. "Relax, Kyle. We're all on the same team." That's my system. Cody put a nice spin on it. Fresh perspective. It's called collaboration. He smirked, like this was a game I didn't know how to play. That night, I stared at my laptop until the clock hit 3 a.m. But not because I was sad or defeated. Something had snapped, but not in the way Dominic wanted. They weren't just stealing my work anymore. They were replacing me. Cody had become the golden boy, Dominic's boss's nephew, the intern with a fast-track ticket to success. Within a month, Cody was hired full-time. The company announced a strategic investment of millions into his project. My project. I sat there in the Monday briefing as Dominic handed Cody the floor, my face blank, but my thoughts on fire. I wasn't going to complain again. I wasn't going to knock on HR's door like some desperate rookie. No, I was going to burn this place down. If the company wanted to act like we didn't matter, they'd find out just how much we did. I started small. A clean slate on my personal laptop, late at night with blackout curtains drawn, just me and a pot of stale coffee. I rebuilt my framework from scratch. No company servers, no freight core assets, nothing they could claim ownership of. Every line of code was mine. Every model, every simulation, every improvement I'd never had time to implement, because Dominic loved cutting corners. I made it better, faster, bulletproof. Once that was in place, I began collecting evidence. I dug through old emails, saved every timestamp that proved when and where I built my work. I downloaded version histories from shared drives, then compared them to the files Dominic had presented. I backed up my designs to encrypted cloud storage and multiple hard drives, but I knew that just having the framework wasn't enough. FreightCore had a long history of squeezing people dry and tossing them aside. I wasn't the first. I started reaching out to the others. Tamsin from engineering had been with the company for 9 years. His last big software upgrade cut our processing errors in half. Dominic rolled it out as if he'd done it over a long weekend. Tamsin got a $50 Amazon gift card and a handshake. We met for coffee one night at a dingy cafe near the rail yard. He looked tired, but interested. I laid out my plan, careful, but direct. What if we built something for ourselves? I asked. A system that doesn't get watered down by politics and bad management. Tamsin's eyes narrowed. You talking about quitting? I'm talking about starting something better. He didn't say yes right away, but 2 days later, I got a text. I'm in. Next came Leo from sales. Leo had this natural charisma, the kind of guy who could sell a snowplow to someone in Arizona. He once secured a 5-year deal with a major shipping partner, only for Dominic to swoop in during the contract signing and take the credit. When the renewal came up, Leo's name wasn't even on the paperwork. When I told him what I was building, he didn't hesitate. About damn time, he said, slamming his coffee cup down. They've been bleeding us dry for years. We added Meredith from analytics, another quiet genius who was always left out of the big meetings. Then came Anaya from customer success, who'd single-handedly saved FreightCor's relationship with its largest client. None of them had gotten more than token recognition. The war room, as I started calling it, wasn't a room at all. It was a mix of late-night video calls, Google Docs under fake project names, and weekend meetups in my garage with whiteboards propped against the wall. We didn't just talk revenge, we talked solutions. What the industry needed, what FreightCor was too bloated to see. Our combined knowledge was lethal. We knew every pain point, every inefficiency that Dominic and his cronies ignored, because they were too busy greasing palms at corporate events. By the end of that first month, we had a plan. I shared my rebuilt framework with them, and they started adding their own expertise. Tamsin tightened the software, Meredith built advanced data models, Leo lined up early interest from old contacts. It felt like we were building something alive, something that couldn't be corrupted by politics. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. They took my seat, so I took the whole damn table. 3 months before the banquet, I walked into a high-rise office in downtown Chicago to meet Gail Iverson. She was known for cutting through the noise in tech pitches. She'd made her fortune backing logistics startups that big players laughed at until they didn't. I wasn't nervous. I'd spent the last 6 weeks building the perfect pitch deck, running live demos of my redesigned framework, and gathering a small army of disillusioned experts from FreightCor who were ready to jump ship. Gail barely glanced at my resume. Show me the model, she said, crossing her legs and leaning forward. I did. I walked her through the platform. Real-time route optimization, predictive analysis for port delays, automatic failover for system bottlenecks, all the pieces FreightCor had ignored because they were too busy inflating their brand image. When I finished, I didn't even have to ask. I'm in, she said. This is the kind of system that gets acquired for hundreds of millions. You've got the right team. I opened my laptop again, flipping to the last slide. Tamsin.Leo, Meredith, Anaya, 7 pros with years of experience and scars from FreightCor's incompetence. We're ready to move the second we're funded. Her smile widened. You've got my backing. Get the patents filed. I'll handle the rest. By the end of that week, the paperwork was in motion. My framework was officially patented under my name and a new company, Iron Vein LLC. A shell at first, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. I leased office space in a half-renovated building 2 blocks from the train yard. It wasn't much, just chipped paint and cheap desks from a liquidation sale, but it was ours. We spent those next weeks in a whirlwind of late nights and strategy calls, while Dominic and Cody strutted around at FreightCor, taking victory laps with my work. We were quietly recruiting talent, people from engineering, data, and even customer service who'd had enough of corporate theft and politics. The war room was no longer just a side project. It was a company waiting to launch. The turning point came when Leo pulled in 5 major clients. Each one had grown sick of FreightCor's missed deadlines and process improvements that were just excuses for cutting corners. We signed them under NDAs and lined up trial runs of our system. The results spoke for themselves. Faster delivery times, lower costs, fewer breakdowns. Every client nodded the same way. When you're ready, we're ready. It was like watching a fuse burn toward an explosion. I'd spent years being invisible, but now everything was lining up. By the time the banquet rolled around, Iron Vein wasn't just an idea. It was fully funded, patented, and primed with clients who were ready to jump. I had a press release queued up, detailing our launch and calling out the outdated practices FreightCor had been hiding under layers of marketing fluff. I had also prepared a stack of resignation letters, not just mine, but those of the 7 core people who kept FreightCor's operations running. Tamsin called it surgical extraction. We weren't walking out quietly. We were walking out with the best ideas, the best people, and the best clients. The banquet was just the final stage of the plan. I didn't walk into that hotel ballroom hoping for a seat. I walked in with the power to dismantle their house of cards. As Ranata stood at the door, telling me there was no space, I almost laughed. They'd left me out of their little celebration, and in return, I'd built something they couldn't buy back. The laptop in my bag didn't just hold my emails and evidence. It held the press release, the patent notices, and every signed contract from clients ready to move with us. I wasn't just walking away from FreightCor, I was taking their future with me. They tried to buy me back, but it was too late. The moment I stepped out of the banquet hall, my phone began to buzz like it had a pulse. Emails, texts, calls, they came in a flood. The first wave was confusion. What is this? Kyle, what are you doing? We need to talk. Then panic started to set in. I could imagine the scene in that banquet room. Dominic's smug grin collapsing as he opened the files I'd sent. Proof that every piece of data, every system enhancement, every innovation Cody had just been awarded for was mine. The resignation letters from Tamsin, Leo, Meredith, and the others were timed perfectly, hitting inboxes like detonations. It wasn't just me leaving, it was the backbone of FreightCor walking out in unison. By the time I reached the parking garage, my phone had 26 missed calls. Renata's message blinked on the screen. Whatever they offered, we'll double it. Just come back. Please. The elevator doors opened, and there was Vincent, the VP of Operations, running toward me like his life depended on it. His tie was loose, sweat rolling down his forehead. He looked less like an executive and more like someone who'd just learned their house was on fire. "Kyle, wait," he gasped, blocking my path. "We need to talk." I stopped, calm as a statue. "An hour ago, I wasn't even worth a chair," I said. He flinched but pushed on. "Listen, I don't know what's going on here, but we can fix this. Whatever Dominic did..." I cut him off, stepping closer. "You mean the years of stealing, the promotions he handed to his drinking buddies, the way he paraded Cody around like a golden boy while using my work as his personal ladder?" Vincent swallowed hard. "I can make this right. We'll get HR involved. It's too late for that." His phone buzzed, and I caught a glimpse of the screen. CEO, HR, operations. Everyone was in full-blown panic mode. The company had no idea that Iron Vein existed, or that 5 major clients were already prepared to walk away from their contracts. "You don't get it, Vincent," I said quietly. "I'm done playing the game. I built something better, and while you're all busy scrambling to figure out who to blame, I'll be building the future you threw away." I walked past him, my footsteps echoing in the stairwell. He didn't follow. Maybe he couldn't. By the time I hit the bottom floor, my phone was still lighting up. Dominic called, then again, then a text. "We can work this out. You're overreacting." I laughed out loud. Overreacting? That word alone made me walk faster. As I slid into my car, another email notification popped up. This one from HR. "We'd like to schedule a discussion regarding your actions tonight." The corporate tone made it sound like I had accidentally sent the wrong file, not dismantled the company's credibility in under 10 minutes. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. When I drove out of the garage, I saw Vincent on the phone, pacing like a man whose ship was sinking. He glanced up at me as I passed, his face pale and desperate. For years, I'd been invisible to them. Now, they were finally seeing me, not as a cog, not as the guy buried in spreadsheets, but as the one holding the match. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about doing things right. Our new office didn't look like much. Bare walls, a squeaky elevator that sometimes refused to open, and a coffee machine that groaned like it had survived a war. The desks were flat-pack IKEA builds that we assembled ourselves over takeout and beer. But when I walked in that morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Tamsin was leaning over a workstation, sleeves rolled up, explaining a code tweak to Meredith. Leo was on the phone with a potential client, smiling like he'd just closed a major deal. Anaya was already setting up onboarding documentation for our first batch of trial customers. These weren't just colleagues anymore. These were people who believed in what we were building. I set my laptop down on my desk, still just a plain folding table, and opened the dashboard we'd built. Our system was live with pilot programs for 2 clients, and early metrics were already outperforming everything FreightCor had promised them. "Morning, boss," Leo said, grinning as he hung up his call. "Just locked down client number 6. They want to switch over by the end of the quarter." I couldn't help but smile. Nice work. Keep this up, and they'll be begging to leave FreightCor behind. At 10 a.m., the press release went out. Iron Vein Logistics, our name, hit the industry feeds with headlines about innovation, transparency, and a team of proven experts taking logistics into the future. By noon, FreightCor's stock had dropped 11%. I didn't have to guess what was happening in their boardroom. Dominic would be scrambling to control the narrative. HR would be hunting for scapegoats. Vincent would probably be begging someone to find out how we'd pulled this off so quietly. The calls started pouring in. Journalists, old co-workers who had once rolled their eyes when I tried to improve systems. Even some managers from FreightCor wanted to talk, suddenly pretending they'd always believed in me. Tamsin looked up from his monitor and smirked. "You see the stock price?" "Dropped again?" I asked. "Down another 2 points in the last hour. Guess we hit a nerve." It wasn't the drop that made me feel good. It was what it represented. Proof that talent, when valued, could shake an empire built on politics and exploitation. By the end of the day, our inbox was overflowing with resumes. Engineers, analysts, sales reps, all from FreightCor. People who'd been chewed up and tossed aside, now looking for a place where good work actually mattered. As I looked around the room, I realized something. This wasn't just about getting even anymore. It wasn't just about showing Dominic or Cody that they'd underestimated the wrong person. It was about creating the kind of company I'd always wanted to work for, one where ideas weren't stolen and credit wasn't a weapon. We weren't just building a team, we were building a future. The old guard tried to scare me back into line, but the power balance had flipped. It was late, almost midnight, when my phone rang. The caller ID made me pause. Preston Fulton, chairman of FreightCor's board. I hadn't heard his voice since my 3rd week at the company, back when he'd given a dry speech about legacy and synergy that made half the room yawn. I answered anyway. "Kyle," he said, his tone calm but sharp, like a lawyer rehearsing for court. "We're going to sue you. You're in breach of contract. We own anything you developed while employed here." I leaned back in my chair, glancing at the team still working in our new office. Tamsin was debugging the back end. Meredith was sketching analytics dashboards on a whiteboard. They didn't even notice the call. I smiled. "You sure about that?" There was a pause. "What do you mean?" I hit record on my phone and set it on the desk. "Everything you think you own?" I rebuilt it from scratch, on my own time, on my own laptop, using nothing tied to FreightCor. I filed patents months ago. You might want to talk to your legal team before threatening me again. Patents don't matter if... "Oh, they matter," I cut him off. "And so do the contracts your company failed to honor. I have documented evidence of FreightCor missing KPIs, breaching client service agreements, and misrepresenting performance. Your lawyers want that dragged into court?" The silence stretched. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth. "You don't understand the gravity of this situation," he said finally, his voice slipping into something darker. "We can make this ugly, very ugly." I chuckled softly. "Preston, this call is being recorded. If you want to keep bluffing, go ahead. But if I were you, I'd think twice before trying to intimidate me. Because the last person you underestimated is the reason your stock dropped 11% yesterday." Another pause. Then, "We'll see you in court." "No," I said. "You'll see me in the headlines." I ended the call and stared at my phone for a moment. It felt good, not just because I had cornered him, but because I didn't feel small anymore. For years, I'd been the guy who swallowed every insult, who let Dominic and the rest of them take whatever they wanted. Not anymore. Meredith looked over. Was that who I think it was? Yeah, I said. He's bluffing. Good, she replied, going back to her whiteboard. Let him sweat. That night, as I closed my laptop and looked around the half-finished office, I realized something important. FreightCor was still playing defense. We were already 10 steps ahead. They finally gave me the recognition I always wanted. Too late. 6 months after Iron Vein launched, our office no longer looked like a startup holding its breath. The walls were painted, the cheap desks replaced with something solid, and the coffee machine actually worked without making death rattles. We had clients lined up for months, and every week brought another inquiry from a company looking to cut ties with FreightCor. That's when Vincent showed up. I was reviewing a new client proposal when I saw him standing in the lobby, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was wrinkled, his tie crooked, and there was a kind of heaviness in his shoulders that I had never seen before. "Kyle," he said when I walked out to greet him. His voice was low, almost defeated. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "Last time you chased me, you said I couldn't just leave. Funny how things change." He sighed, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here with an offer. From the board." I opened the folder. It was all there. A buyout offer for Iron Vein, equity options, and a shiny new title, Chief Innovation Officer of FreightCor. The number on the page was staggering. "We've restructured," Vincent said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Dominic's gone, HR's been gutted. The CEO's finally listening to the people who actually make things happen. We want you back, this time on your terms." I glanced past him to the glass wall of our conference room. Inside, Tamsin and Meredith were mapping out a new AI-driven routing system, while Leo was on a call with yet another prospective client. These were the people who had believed in me when no one else did. "Back then," I said, "I asked for a seat at the table. You couldn't even give me a folding chair." Vincent's eyes dropped. "We made mistakes, big ones. But this is your chance to take control, to lead." I closed the folder. "I am leading, right now." He swallowed hard. "Kyle, be reasonable. We're offering you everything you wanted. The money, the authority, the recognition." "You think I built this just for money?" I asked, gesturing to the office around me. "You think I walked away just to come crawling back when you finally noticed my value?" "No, Vincent. You had your chance. You blew it." The words hung between us like a closing door. Vincent's face fell, and for a moment he looked older, like the last 6 months had aged him by years. "If you change your mind," he started, but I was already walking back to my team. "Not interested," I said over my shoulder. 1 year later, I wasn't just back. I was center stage. The Logistics Tech Conference in Dallas was the biggest event in the industry. A year ago, I'd been standing outside a locked banquet hall, watching my work paraded under someone else's name. Now, as I walked onto that stage, all I could see were the faces of the people who had once dismissed me. Board members, FreightCor managers, even Cody sitting in the back row. No longer the golden boy, but just another faded name tag. I started with their own words. "You can wait outside." The crowd shifted, some recognizing the phrase, others waiting to see where I'd go with it. I smiled. That's what I was told when I tried to bring new ideas to the table, when I worked late nights to solve problems and was told to keep quiet because I didn't fit the picture they wanted to paint. But here's the thing about telling someone to wait outside. Eventually, they build their own table. There was a pause, then applause, slow at first, but growing. I didn't gloat. I didn't even mention FreightCor by name. I didn't have to. Everyone already knew what had happened to them. The plummeting stock, the mass client exodus, the headlines about a company losing its talent to a startup they'd underestimated. Instead, I talked about Iron Vein, about how we built a system that wasn't about cutting corners or hoarding credit, but about transparency and real results. I talked about the power of valuing the people who do the work, not just the people who talk the loudest. Behind me, the screen lit up with our metrics: faster delivery routes, higher client retention, record-breaking efficiency gains. The numbers spoke louder than any insult I could have thrown back at my old company. As I looked out over the audience, I caught sight of Tamsin and Meredith sitting in the front row, their faces lit up with pride. Leo was in the second row, already taking calls from potential clients who wanted to talk before the conference ended. This wasn't just my victory. It was ours. When the keynote wrapped, the applause was louder than I'd ever expected. Some people even stood. I stepped back from the podium and let out a slow breath, realizing how far I'd come from that night outside the banquet room. I didn't build Iron Vein just to prove a point. I built it because I was done waiting for someone else to decide I was worth listening to. As I walked off the stage, a few reporters rushed forward, asking about our next steps. I smiled and said, "We're just getting started." And for the first time in my career, I didn't feel like I was fighting for a seat. I'd built the table, and there was room for everyone who deserved it.